Welcome into A to Z Sports Prime Time, Sunday night edition. Lovely to have you guys in for another episode of the show. Happy Sunday evening to you. Hope your weekend was tremendous. So, OTAs. We're going to take a brief pause from the OTA conversation now that we'll have mandatory minicamp. Mike Vrabel doing the schedule a little different this year than in years past. 2 OTAs, minicamp, mandatory minicamp, then followed by another round of voluntary OTAs. So they've changed the schedule slightly, which means the most important week of the offseason to date is coming up. And that will not conclude the entirety of the offseason, but it will conclude the entirety of the voluntary portion that they will participate in. And of course, there's many questions that we'll talk about later this week. Kevin Byard, Harold Landry, Christian Fulton, all guys who I know people are curious to both hear from and see. But in the meantime, we've been having kind of more of an existential discussion around the offense, right? How to best maximize the Titans offense and where that's going to come from, what their greatest source or their greatest percentage chance of getting that from might actually be. So we're going to take a look at Treylon Burks and Derrick Henry as to their level of importance to this Titans offense. We'll talk about offseason hype, speaking of quarterbacks, around Anthony Richardson and the Titans division. And we'll get to this as a free site, the best thing that I saw on the internet this weekend. We got a lot of these things to go over. And of course, we're keeping an eye on the NBA Finals Game 2 for you. A halftime lead for Denver, 57-51 over the Heat at present. With everything that's going on, though, I think there's a lot of good discussions to get into on this, and I'm curious to see how you guys are kind of looking at the future of your offense. With that being said, we need you guys to share the show around wherever you are consuming us on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and on Twitch. If you're hanging out on Twitter, please retweet the show. Bottom right-hand corner of your screen is where you do so. If you're on Facebook Live like John Vargas or Corey D. Jackson, you can like the video, you can share not a public in the bottom left-hand corner of your screen. If you're on YouTube like Titan Fox, you can like the video, you can subscribe to the channel. You can do both of those things. And if you've done both of them already, tell a friend to do the same. We would be grateful for you. And once you've done that, more of you guys will start to trickle in and we'll get this thing up and rolling. Welcome into A to Z Sports Prime Time from the Superbook Sports Studios. I'm your host, Buck Rising, and I am proud, as always, to be presented to you by Superbook Sports. Download the app, plug in the promo code ATOZ, that's A2Z, for $250, up to $250 to match your first bet. Promo code A2Z in the Superbook Sports app. The Ashton Real Estate Group of RE/MAX Advantage, GaryAshton.com is where you go for your dream address without the stress. The Intel edge you need to succeed can be found at GaryAshton.com. And TrueMav Fitness. Tuesday and Thursday are my days to go to TrueMav. But of course, you can go anytime and get your first workout free as a Middle Tennessee resident at TrueMavFitness.com. So with the Titans and where their offense is right now, Sam Cardenas gives the obvious answer. Both they go hand in hand, talking about Derrick Henry and Treylon Burks, how to make the Titans offense most successful. But the point of this exercise is not to say the obvious, right? The obvious is, of course, yes, every player on the Titans, and I'm not dismissing your comment, Sam. I'm just saying, for the purposes of this exercise, of course, it is important for all 11 players to contribute to that side of the ball. It is important for the coach to be competent, the coordinator to be better than he has in years past. Like, of course, to make this thing successful, all of these things have to work in concert with one another. But the question becomes, all right, when we've seen them go about this in a couple of different ways over the last couple of years, whether that's Derrick Henry and A.J. Brown or now Derrick Henry and Treylon Burks, what has it been harder for them to replace? And I think that answer becomes very, very obvious. I think that when you look at all the different elements, Derrick Henry is the thing that they lean on the most. Derrick Henry, Jason Wakefield says, the king is our offense. That's the problem, though, Jason. Derrick Henry is your lone source of offense. And while I have covered Derrick Henry's entire career, and I believe him to be a future Hall of Famer, you see the ceiling that has. Derrick Henry was available for every game last season. He was sat for week 17 against the Dallas Cowboys because there was no point in playing many of the players who participated or many of the starters who were going to be needed for that next week in Jacksonville with playoff implications on the line. The problem with Derrick Henry being the primary source of your offense is that offense can be stopped, as we've seen in the last couple of years. It's much easier to stop a Derrick Henry, a Derrick Henry-centric offense in the last couple of seasons. 2019, that obviously wasn't the case. 2020, they had an explosive passing game to pair with Derrick Henry, and obviously Derrick was able to have incredible success, a 2,000-yard season. He had more help around him. There was other things on the field to distract from Derrick Henry so that defenses weren't just loading the box and taking away the thing that everybody knows that the Titans are going to do, which is hand the ball to Derrick Henry. So I think that while you look at these things, you can understand that Derrick Henry is still a valuable asset. Derrick Henry is still an incredible weapon. Derrick Henry, at the same time, still needs more help. And so with the conversation that I think we're getting ready to have, and that's where I'll pose your Two Rivers Ford take to you on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and on Twitch in the comment section, if you would be so kind. Which player is most important to the Titans' offensive success this coming season? Is it Derrick Henry or is it Treylon Burks? We will discuss at length together right after I remind you that the Two Rivers Ford take is made possible by the great people at Two Rivers Ford. Two Rivers Ford always has quality American-made Ford vehicles. 2023 model year Fords available right now. If you are thinking about your next vehicle, whether that's new or pre-owned, nobody matches the honesty and integrity that Two Rivers Ford does business with. 40 years in Middle Tennessee, Two Rivers Ford in Mount Juliet, or online at tworiversford.com. So, as you look at the thing that's most important for the Titans to have offensive success this year, is it Derrick or is it Treylon? Brandon Smith says Derrick Henry 22 better be. Jonathan Hernandez says Burks because we just drafted Spears. Desmond Kingsley says we need a better OC. Well, this one hasn't even called plays for you yet. So, at least maybe let me get through a preseason game before you try and fire in another offensive coordinator. I'm not saying that you shouldn't have fired the last one, but for God's sakes, you know what I'm saying? So I think that for a lot of people, there is a level of deference to Derrick Henry because of how great he is. That should be obvious, right? There is nothing wrong with having deference towards Derrick Henry for building an offense that is primarily focused, first and foremost, on running the football and controlling the clock, even as modern day offense would indicate that you need to be more pass-centric or that it would benefit you to be more pass-centric. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't win with a rushing offense that's or an offense that's primarily built off the run. Easy for me to say. Cleveland, Baltimore. You could point out a number of different teams in the NFL that have great success. San Francisco, right? These are running-based offenses, or the offense thrives off the ability to run the football. Now, there's a difference between a rushing attack that you build everything else off of versus establishing the run. This is something that Greg Cosell and I talked about on the live show, the live taping of the install, when we talked about you don't need to run the football in a game to establish the run when you have Derrick Henry. The run is already established because of Derrick Henry's presence. And those are the kind of things that I think people have to remember. So there's a deference to Derrick Henry, but you also want to be able to have a counterpunch. And the problem with the Titans' approach in the last couple of years is that sometimes they have the counterpunch when A.J. Brown or Treylon Burks is healthy. And when they don't, it's very easy to slow down the Tennessee Titans, to make them an offense that is, unsustainable. And the result, maybe not to the extreme that it was last year, but the result is your unsustainable offense leads to the most 3-and-outs in football. Your red zone offense is great, but because your percentage of opportunities in the red zone is so much smaller, you're not really cashing in the way that you think you ought to be cashing in with a red zone offense that's in the top. I think they were still a top 6 red zone offense in 2022. And that may seem counterintuitive because how bad they were offensively. And again, when you look at the amount of times that they actually got inside the 20, then it makes sense why their offensive red zone success percentage was a lot higher that way. They weren't having as many opportunities at the red zone. And so when they did get there, they were still able to cash in. But the problem is they weren't getting there often enough. So when I look at the sample size, and it's not just because Derrick's a running back, right? I would say this of a great many offenses. When they lost Derrick for half a season in 2021, and they had to manage not just the loss of Derrick Henry, but also Julio Jones, mostly out of the lineup, A.J. Brown in and out of the lineup, missing some time. There was a variety of different reasons why in 2021 they had offensive struggles, but it wasn't because they weren't able to run the football. They found ways to run the football without Derrick Henry. In fact, they were successful, very successful running the football with Derrick Henry. Many of you were complaining in the Cincinnati Bengals game that Derrick Henry got too much run, which if I said that to you again, you may say, some of you who held that opinion at the time when Derrick Henry was in his first game back off of the foot surgery, you may say now, a couple of years removed from that result, you may say, well, of course, that's ridiculous. I wasn't somebody who was saying that Derrick Henry should receive less carries. How could anybody argue that Derrick Henry should receive less carries? And yet, there was a very loud percentage of you that were talking about, well, why isn't D'Onta Foreman running the ball against the Bengals in that playoff game? It wouldn't have stopped Ryan Tannehill from throwing 3 interceptions, but Derrick Henry at that point still wasn't the best version of himself. So I think that Stephen Massey gives an accurate statement, and I want to make sure that I put it into proper context. So thank you, Stephen. Hard to compare because Burks isn't on a comp level yet. I'm not sure what a comp level means specifically, but I think I understand your point. Treylon Burks is not A.J. Brown, right? And Treylon Burks has not been as reliable or as proven or as sustainable as Derrick Henry. But I think that what Treylon Burks projects to be, and you know I'm not a big fan of projections, but I think that in the modern day, Treylon Burks is the more valuable asset at this point. And I'll explain what I mean here in just a second. But first, I want to remind you that the Primetime Show is made possible by the great people at Superbook Sports. Download the app, plug in the promo code ATOZ, and they'll match your first bet up to $250 at Superbook Sports. Nobody has better odds boost. Nobody has better promo bets than the great folks at Superbook. So download the Superbook app today. They'll, as I mentioned, plug in the promo code ATOZ, and they'll match your first bet up to $250. Simply visit superbook.com for terms and conditions. Gambling problem? Call the Tennessee Red Line, 1-800-889-9789. So Treylon Burks is the more valuable asset at this point because Derrick is still a hugely productive player. Derrick, to date, is still a force of nature. When last we saw him, he was having his second best rushing total behind an offensive line that was complete and total shit, right? So, and without a semblance of a passing game, without a quarterback situation that was any kind of stable, Derrick Henry was still a valuable asset, but that asset was not good enough to save them from 7 straight losses, right? And I know Derrick didn't play in one of those 7 games, but you understand my larger point. Derrick isn't enough anymore. So it's not just going to be Derrick, and it's not just going to be Burks. It's going to be Tim Kelly. It's going to be Charles London, the quarterback's coach, how he helps them succeed his efforts to help them succeed as a pass game coordinator. It's going to be Kyle Phillips, Chigakonkwo, Peter Skoronski. Can they get better protection? Can they get better run blocking execution? All of those things matter. But the purpose of Treylon Burks here is to allow there to be another kind of a threat other than the threat of Derrick Henry. The threat of Treylon Burks is not established yet, though you could see a tangible difference even last year in a smaller sample size when Treylon Burks was available to them and in the game versus when Treylon Burks was not. What it allowed them to do is have the threat of a downfield passing game. What it allowed them to do is to at least pose a threat to a secondary that they had somebody who could get behind the defensive backs, as Treylon Burks has shown himself capable to do. Not necessarily the fastest in a straight line, but still the kind of playmaking speed, play strength, and play speed that you desire from an option like that. We have no idea what this player is going to be in his career just yet. And I'm not saying that he is at this point a better football player than Derrick Henry. And he may become that, who's to say? But what I'm looking at in today's offense with Derrick Henry, no matter what tweaks rather is the word that I'm looking for, tinkers, I don't, for those of you who watch the league, right? Ruxin, tinkering with your fantasy lineup. That's got stuck in my head. It's one of my favorite shows, despite that guy lying about being in the towers for 9/11. I think that with everything that you look at with the Titans right now, Treylon Burks just gives you another option. You need a counterpunch. You don't have one. Sometimes that counterpunch may be better as your primary, may not necessarily feel like your primary option, but the counterpunch in this case is almost as important as the initial right hook, right? The initial right hook is Derrick Henry, but if you're throwing a right hook on every first down, more often than not, you're just stopping at the line of scrimmage or falling behind for a yard or two. You have to have that counterpunch that allows your primary option, your primary source of offense, your primary attack to at least be able to get off the ground, right? At least to be able to have an extra defender out of the box to give him a degree of running room. There is no question that a downfield passing threat makes Derrick Henry a more viable option. Derrick Henry is still a viable option, but that viable option did not help you win football games last year in the way that it needs to, okay? I will say this, though, that Derrick Henry correcting the fumbling issue that he had last season, however that gets rectified, if that gets rectified, is as big a storyline to follow at the start of the season as any other. Because I know it was frustrating to Derrick. Certainly he wasn't trying to turn the ball over at the rate that he was last year, but he couldn't hang on to the football. And the reasons for that, maybe he needs to readjust how he's how he's carrying the ball, where he's used to pulling away from people, and that's not happening as often, though he's still able to break away from the play. From time to time, he's not doing it with quite the frequency. You're seeing these balls pop loose on a more regular basis, whether that's because he's being caught, whether that's because of the way that he's carrying the football, or weather conditions. There's a variety of different things. But Derrick Henry's turnover situation has to be rectified for this team to have a semblance of success. JNDNYDSG, that's a long name, says Derrick always had a fumble issue outside of one season. Well, no, that's not, or at least he's never had a fumbles lost situation like he has this year. In fact, I can pull up Derrick Henry's fumbles across his career, courtesy of StatMuse, his career fumbles, to give you a better picture. Because I know he's had fumbles in his career, but never to the rate that he had last year. Because he only has, so think about this, okay? He only has 17 career fumbles. If I told you that Derrick Henry only has 17 career fumbles, you would say, well, then that is not across what? Let's see. Derrick Henry has now played 7 seasons in the NFL. His rookie season, no fumbles lost because he was barely playing, right? They found ways to get him on the field. He had 490 yards, but he wasn't the primary source of offense for that 2016 Titans team. He had one fumble, no fumbles in 16. That was his rookie year. One fumble in 17, one fumble in 18, but that was his first lost fumble in 2018. Derrick Henry has had a total of 9 career lost fumbles, and 17 times has he lost control of the football. Now, in 2019, ironically enough, was the most Derrick Henry had fumbled until this past season in any given season. He had fumbled the ball 5 times. He had lost 3 of those, but also obviously had an incredible year, 1,540 yards. He was averaging over 100 yards per game. He had 16 rushing touchdowns, and of course the playoff run that very few running backs have been able to match. Derrick Henry in every other season besides 2019, 2020 he had 3 and lost 2. 2021 he had 1 and lost none, but of course he only played in 8 games. And then last year is the most that Derrick Henry has ever fumbled the football as a Tennessee Titan. 6 fumbles, 3 total lost, and that Jacksonville game in particular is a point that you look at and say, well, that is a game that Derrick Henry was as responsible for losing as any, where Derrick Henry has always been the thing that gives you the best opportunity to beat the Jaguars. Derrick Henry owns the Jaguars, right? Well, this year the Jags got the better of Derrick Henry in particular the fumbles at this point. Pastor Raymond Little says all his fumbles last year was him fighting for extra yards because he had no help around him. Well, that's not, I mean, you can make any excuse for Derrick Henry that you want to. And I'm not saying that Derrick Henry is not, trying his damnedest out there, because obviously he is. There's no question. Nobody is here to question Derrick's effort. But I think that in the same, I think there needs to be a measure of keep that same energy for criticism. Ryan Tannehill is the quarterback. Ryan Tannehill is inherently more responsible for this team's successes or this team's failures. But Derrick Henry was a big part of the problem last year, even as he was a statistically successful football player. Keep that same energy for your criticisms when it comes to the things that cost you football games, even as Derrick Henry in this particular situation, in this particular city, and on this particular team is a bit of a sacred cow, right? Derrick Henry is not immune from criticism. And Derrick Henry has some issues of his own that he has to rectify heading into 2023. So I think Burks on the whole is the more important piece for them to get solidified. And then Derrick Henry can be successful in conjunction with that, not have to pull all of this weight by himself, have some more help around him. No matter what the result of this season is, they have to find more help for Derrick Henry. And it's almost certainly Derrick Henry's last year on the Tennessee Titans. That, I think, is the thing that, looms over all of this, is that it would be very, very difficult to envision a scenario, not impossible, but very, very difficult to envision a scenario where they bring him back this year at his age, at his position, and at likely what that price point would be, as opposed to finding a more cost-effective option where running backs are more easily replaceable, even guys who have Hall of Fame type resumes, the way that Derrick Henry clearly and obviously does. So, whatever you want to excuse away his fumbles for, like I said, you can make excuses for any player based on their performance. The matter of fact is that Derrick Henry was not up to peak performance last year, and they need him to be much closer to that. They need him to be a better version of himself. And certainly Derrick has proven that he is up to step up to the challenge, that he is willing to put in the work. And I have every bit of confidence that Derrick Henry is going to have another very, very successful season, provided that, he stay healthy. But I think that everything that has resulted in the last couple of years shows you that Derrick Henry cannot be the only thing that you're leaning on time in and time out. All right, let's move on and let's talk about something else that's ridiculous. The idea that Anthony Richardson is blowing the doors off of Colts media in OTAs is ridiculous. I'm going to explain what I mean by that here in just a second. I'll ask you the question on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and on Twitch this evening. Fair or foul? Anthony Richardson OTAs hype. You know how I feel about it. I'm going to explain to you why I feel that way momentarily, right after I remind you that the Primetime Show is presented by the wonderful people at the Ashton Real Estate Group of RE/MAX Advantage. Go to GaryAshton.com and get your dream address without the stress. The Intel Edge is what you need to succeed at GaryAshton.com. They'll get you going with that real estate intel that you need to sell your home for more, that you need to find your next home while you sell your current one in this red hot Nashville real estate market, and cash in on your home equity now. Nobody is better than the Ashton Real Estate Group of RE/MAX Advantage, the favorite team of your favorite teams. Go to GaryAshton.com. So I think that when you look at the discussion around OTAs, right? Fair or foul on Anthony Richardson at this point. Corey D. Jackson says so is Des Fitzpatrick. Talking about OTAs hype, right? We talked about that, I think, a little bit last week. Des Fitzpatrick has been impressing people at Steelers OTAs. And everybody around here is looking over at that with a bit of side eye because, of course, Des Fitzpatrick and the word impress is not something that had happened at any point in the last couple of seasons. So what might be different about Des Fitzpatrick now in Pittsburgh than it was in Tennessee? I think that when you look at a variety of different things, OTAs is a difficult time of year to evaluate. But I do think that it's foul because everybody looks fantastic during OTAs because there's no pads. There's no pass rush on these quarterbacks. There's no real offensive line or defensive line play. There's really not even a running game. Hell, Mike Vrabel half the time told us sometimes it looks like real football out there talking about OTAs. So when I see all of this hype around Anthony Richardson, it's not Anthony Richardson's fault. Anthony Richardson may go on to be a hugely successful player. The idea of hyping up anybody, whether it's Levis, Richardson, Treylon Burks, right? CJ Stroud, if I haven't seen much noise around Houston, or Bryce Young, whichever quarterback you want to use, whoever you are making grand assessments of in OTAs, it's probably being overhyped.
That was impressive.
So it's just him going through, the Colts standard quarterback drills, and he may look great in the middle of that. It's nothing that blew the doors off. The reason why I thought it was ridiculous, and listen, again, it's totally fine that you would see Anthony Richardson going through this, but I think it's unfair what's happening to Anthony Richardson from this sense. The tweet from that video reads this way: Anthony Richardson will be a problem for a long time. Look at the Colts' first-round selection in OTAs with 3 of the mind-blown emojis, right? When all he's doing is going through routine quarterback drills. It's one of the things, I think it's one of the biggest disservices that you can do to a rookie right now, is to gas them up this way in OTAs based on, something that is utterly routine. There were some comments from his coach, Steichen, Shane Steichen, the new Colts head coach, the former Eagles offensive coordinator, who, by the way, I love that fit. I think the Colts and Anthony Richardson might be the best fit out of any of them because I do have that much respect for Shane Steichen. Now, Shane Steichen talked about Anthony Richardson doing next-level stuff at OTAs, and a big headline was made out of it, right? Well, what fans might consider to be next-level stuff versus, and media, based on how you receive the comments from Shane Steichen versus what Shane Steichen's seeing every day, Shane Steichen is talking on a much, much more rudimentary level, from one rudimentary level to the next rudimentary level as they work on the development of a quarterback who is super, super raw and needs to play more football for them to be able to have any kind of an accurate assessment around him. So when you say next level stuff as a coach, it's probably different than how you and I would initially receive something like that. Or we're looking at it as next level. That means he must be operating on a much higher plane than we gave him credit for. No, it's probably, his footwork has reached the next level, or his command of the huddle has reached the next level. Those are the kind of levels that we're operating in at OTAs. It's very, very small incremental improvements. And what the coaches are looking for right now is players who are not making old mistakes, but who are making new ones so that they can at least find ways to correct that behavior and see if these guys can identify the things that were causing them to make right or wrong decisions in the first place. It's foul. For those of you who are wondering my opinion, it's foul. Any hype around any player at OTAs at this point. Let's wrap up with, this is a free site, the best thing that I saw on the internet this weekend. Let me know what was it that made you smile this weekend on the internet. There was a great many things, I think, to pull from. Right now, by the way, game 2 of the finals back underway. Miami down 6 with 6 minutes to play. 69-66, Denver's lead under 6 minutes at this point. So looking at all the different results from the weekend, whether that's basketball, hockey was a lot of fun. Vegas, the Golden Knights putting on quite a show yesterday evening. Tennessee baseball getting in on the action. Vanderbilt having some success. Roberts ECU Pirates not doing so well. Unfortunate. We were really, really rooting them on today. But either way, what was the best thing that you saw in sports this weekend? I'll tell you mine here in just a second, right after I remind you that the Primetime Show is made possible by True Math Fitness in the Gulch. Go to TrueMathFitness.com for your first workout free as a Middle Tennessee resident. I go Tuesdays and Thursdays at 8 a.m. I hope to see you there while I'm getting the best workout around. You can do that too. You can work out with their group classes. You can go for personal training. I prefer personal training at this point, but I've really enjoyed their group classes as well. And as a member, you get access to their open gym so you can work out how you want, when you want, on your own schedule. True Math Fitness is the best way to work out. Their facility is fantastic. It's conveniently located in downtown Nashville in the Gulch, and your first workout is free at TrueMathFitness.com. So what's the best thing that you saw this weekend? Corey D. Jackson says the Savannah Banana game by far. Do you know more people hit me up for tickets to that at First Horizon Park this weekend than any other sporting event that I have, that I can remember. I always get asked for tickets by, friends or whatever, and that's fine. Or people who aren't really that close of friends, acquaintances will ask for tickets a lot of time. I'm very happy to tell everybody, no, I won't get you tickets. Maybe I could get you tickets, but I don't really want to get you tickets because I don't like when people ask me to get the tickets, largely, unless I offer them to you, right? That's different. But the thing that I had more people hit me up about than anything, more than Titans playoff games, more than Preds Stanley Cup opportunities, more than what else? A steeplechase or, Nashville SC, more than anything. The damn Savannah Bananas at First Horizon Park. I heard it was epic. I did not hear a bad word about it. They travel the country and they put on an absolute show. I honestly, I would have wanted to go had I not been on the boat all weekend. And really look forward to seeing or hearing some of the stories from you guys as callers on the radio show tomorrow, because I know a great many of you were in attendance this weekend. But yeah, the Savannah Bananas putting on a show. The best thing that I saw this weekend was not Tennessee, not the University of Tennessee's win today, but their win yesterday in 14 innings over Clemson. It was electric, the atmosphere, and the Vols, merely 3 wins away from being back in the College World Series.
Zane Denton hopes to pull Tennessee closer or give the Vols the lead. 2 balls, 2 strikes, 2 down. Kicks and delivers. Pitch it high in the air towards left field. Going down the line. Let's see, is it fair? It is! Zane Denton has given Tennessee the lead! With 2 out, the Volunteers have life and now have the upper hand. His second blast for the Big Orange in tonight's ball game.
Tennessee leads by 1 on a go-ahead bomb from Zane Denton.
He tees off on the 2-2 offering, and Tennessee leads Clemson 5-4. Thank you, Zane Denton.
Just electric atmosphere this weekend. It's they're at the Clemson regional. Tennessee is Vanderbilt, of course, the Nashville regional, and a lot of success by the state of Tennessee in their respective regional performances. So we'll look forward to talking about that tomorrow on the radio show. Obviously, Titans mandatory minicamp, 3 days. So we'll be talking a lot of Titans this week from 10 to 1 on 104.5 The Zone. Hope to hang out with you guys then. If I don't see you tomorrow at 10 a.m., then we will catch up with you tomorrow night on A to Z Sports Primetime. See you guys.
Are you surprised to hear that?
Certainly not. The first year we took it to the limit. And I was in Miami with my new beach house. Well, it was a couple minutes from the beach.
It's been 20 years since then. We haven't been too strong in the last few years.
Oh, we've been strong. We're just playing by the rules. You can't have a newcomer come in and steal a show.